There we go. Okay, so yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Kelsey Romer. I am an AmeriCorps member with the Preservation Alliance of West Virginia, and the site where I do my national service is the Northern West Virginia Brownfields Assistance Center and the WVU Bad Buildings Program. So today is session 1 of our 2021 Bad Buildings webinar series. Normally this would be for the Bad Buildings Summit that happens every year, but of course in the COVID-19 era, we had to switch and go online. So we're going to do a monthly webinar series. Now we're going to start with Bad Buildings 101, which makes sense, get you all introduced to what Bad Buildings is. So to kick things off today, I'm going to go ahead and have Nicole Diaz, the Bad Buildings Project Associate, give you the introduction. We're going to use the chat function a lot today, so after I kick it over to Nicole, feel free to go ahead and drop any questions you have in the chat, and we'll be monitoring that, and we'll have time for Q&A at the end.
All right, hello everyone. Like Kelsey said, my name is Nicole Diaz. I'm the project associate with Bad Buildings, and I am going to try to share my screen. All right, can everyone see this? Nod your head, yes? Okay, awesome. So yes, this is just a basic introduction to the Bad Buildings program. So Bad Buildings 101. So just an overview, the Bad Buildings program, BAD is actually an acronym that stands for Brownfield, Abandoned, and Dilapidated. And the program is a statewide initiative that provides technical assistance and site analysis tools to enhance abandoned and dilapidated building programs in West Virginia communities. So we do work in communities all across the state of West Virginia, and these sites that we help with can be anything from industrial, mixed use, commercial, residential, institutional, or other types of buildings. All right, so again, what are bad buildings? I'm sorry, something's in the way. Okay. Like I said, brownfield, and if you don't know what a brownfield is, the EPA's definition of brownfield is a property, the expansion, redevelopment, or reuse of which may be complicated by the presence or potential presence of a hazardous substance, pollutant, or contaminant. And these are just some pictures of brownfields. It's typically like old, maybe industrial buildings, and then you guys know what abandoned buildings are, and dilapidated. So there are a lot of negative impacts of having these brownfield, abandoned, and dilapidated buildings in your communities, including an increased number of drug theft and violent crimes. So there are actually a lot of drug use and other illegal things happening in abandoned buildings and dilapidated buildings. There are typically a lot of fires that are set, whether or not they are potentially set on fire to bring the structure down, or it may just be someone in these buildings trying to keep a fire for warmth. There are also environmental, health, and safety hazards which tie into that, as well as reduced tax revenue. It can slow economic development in your area. It can detract potential developers because developers don't typically want to bring their new business into a town and be located right next to an abandoned building. And if you live next to one of these buildings, it can actually lower your property values, and it just demoralizes communities in general. If we get rid of these buildings or rehab them, it can turn into a positive thing. It can create new and local jobs if these buildings are either torn down or redeveloped. It brings space for new economic development. It will increase your property values and the surrounding property values. It can preserve green fields, so untouched and undeveloped sites. Instead of developing on those sites, we can just reuse the sites where these were, and it can eliminate eyesores. Right, so these are just some news articles that I have come across with in the past. Actually, The tiger that was found in an abandoned house in Houston was, I think, about a year or two ago. And basically, there was a abandoned building, and someone walked into it. I'm not sure what they were trying to do in there, but there was this tiger in a cage there. And so, you know, they called the cops, and everyone was trying to figure out. But yeah, so surprisingly, you can find very crazy things in abandoned houses. Tigers are not typical, but that has happened. Other articles on here have talked about fires, like I said. There was one in Oregon City where an abandoned building burned 12 acres in Oregon City. Baltimore has sites that have just become a dumping ground. So yeah, if you ever Google abandoned buildings issues, there are a ton of news articles, mostly having to do with fires. All right, this is an example of what it can look like. You know, if you do have a abandoned or dilapidated property demolished. Now, while the vacant lot isn't also the most beautiful thing, it is more safe than having the building there, and also the vacant lot can be redeveloped into something else. These are just some of the communities that the Bad Buildings Program has worked in. Other communities that have been added recently were Paw Paw, Hinton, Sistersville, I believe, and a few others. So like I said, we do work all across the state. So we do follow a Bad Buildings model that we had developed, and there are 2 phases. So I'm just going to quickly go over all the steps in this, and then in further slides, I'll go into more detail about each step. But basically, the first step is to form a team of volunteers. Step 2 is to train that team. Step 3 is to develop an inventory. Step 4 is to create a redevelopment plan. And step 5 is to actually implement that plan. So like I said, step 1 is to form a team. So we try to let anyone in the community that wants to be a part of the team be a part of the team. We do not gatekeep the Bad Buildings Program. So anyone from local business owners, elected officials, youth, fire department, police department, housing authorities, just any concerned citizens are more than welcome to join the Bad Buildings team. Step 2 is to train the team. I know that this is probably hard to read. I couldn't really make it any bigger, but I believe if you go to our website, which is located at the bottom of the screen, you can see these sheets bigger. But basically, this is the survey sheet that we use to have people in communities go out and actually survey the buildings. And so basic information at the top, such as who completed the survey, the date that it was completed, that's important. So, you know, years down the road, we can go back and see if anything's changed, and we can see when it was first surveyed. The property address, which a lot of the times vacant and abandoned buildings do not have addresses on them anymore, whether or not the numbers have fallen off. So if there's not a specific property address, we ask to just do the best description you can, such as like the third blue house on the left on whatever street it's on. Things such as parcel number and the latitude and longitude and anything that is in that box outlined in orange, that is not information that you can necessarily get by just looking at the buildings. And since these are windshield surveys that we get just by walking by the house, that is actually something that we fill out later. But we like to put whether or not it's vacant, the type of property it is, whether it's a single family, a duplex, multifamily, commercial. We also do vacant lots if the community wishes to do that. And so the middle of this sheet where it says structure conditions checklist is where we actually stand, you know, at the street. We do not enter any properties. And we look at it and we rate the building frame and structure, roof, chimney, gutters, windows and doors, siding, veneer and paint, and the porch and entrance overhang. And under each of those is a little definition that helps you figure out which one you should check. So there's either no problems, minor problems, or major problems. So for example, under building frame and structure, it would be considered a major problem if the building is not straight and it's leaning, or porch entrance overhang, it would be major if there's deterioration, if there's porch steps missing, things like that. So then after we fill out that middle part, we actually go to the bottom where it says definitions of structure conditions. And that is where we can tell whether or not the building is in good condition, fair, poor, or should be demolished. And that is just by saying, such for an instance, where it says good, it says it needs no more than 2 minor repairs. So that's where you would just refer back to that middle section in order to fill out the bottom. On the back of the sheet is where we have the definitions for if a community wanted to do vacant lots. And then also there's a space for owner information once you look that up later in the process. Sometimes it is not very easy to tell if a building is vacant or not. So on the back of the sheet in the box that's outlined in orange is just some vacant building indicators that may help to decide if it's vacant or not, such as the yard maintenance has been neglected, there's excessive mail, maybe it's burnt out, but it's also important to recognize that just because a house may look like that does not necessarily mean that it is a vacant house. All right, so I'm just gonna like run through one of the survey sheets kind of the best that I can on Zoom, and it's going to be this building. So we're pretending like we are going out and surveying this building, which is actually located in Fairmont. And by looking at the sheet, I'm sorry, all the Zoom stuff is in my way. Okay, the building frame and structure, I personally would rate this as minor. Because the building's not leaning, but obviously it's not in great condition. The roof chimney gutters, major damage. You can see that there are holes in the roof and part of the roof is missing. Windows and doors, major. Most of the windows are busted out and the doors are rotted. Siding, veneer, and paint, major, mostly just because in the front you can kind of see where like paint is chipping away. It's missing some of that wall in the front area. Porch entrance overhang, no problems because there is no porch or entrance overhang. And so by looking at all of those, the building was rated should be demolished because it is not structurally sound. One thing that I would like to add is whenever we have people in the community go out and do these surveys, we typically try to put them in at least pairs of 2, one for safety and also to try to be objective, because I'm sure that maybe some of you guys are sitting there looking at this picture and may not agree with me entirely on how I rated the building. So it's just nice to have, you know, more than one person looking at the same building. Right, we're gonna do one more. It's a completely different type of building that does look a little more sound than the last one. So this one, building frame and structure, I rated as minor because the building isn't leaning. Roof chimney gutters, also minor. You can't really see the entirety of the roof, but from what I can see, it looks like it's just in need of some minor repairs. Siding, veneer, and paint, also minor. Windows and doors, major, just because on the upper level, you can see that at least one of the windows is completely broken. Porch and entrance overhang, major, there's significant deterioration, and it just looks like, you know, it might be falling apart. And with all that said, the building overall was rated as poor because it was in need of 2 or more major repairs. Just because the building's poor doesn't mean that it needs to be demolished. It just might be a little more costly to fix, but since the building frame and structure seems to be sound, yeah, overall it's just rated as poor. All right, step 3 is to develop the inventory. So after the volunteers in the community go out and fill out their sheets, they'll bring their sheets back and we will discuss how to find other important information that we need, such as the map and parcel number, the lot square footage, building square footage, the date it was built, whether or not it's on the historical registry, and owner information. And from there, we develop a spreadsheet that has all this information. And we also send out a friendly letter to the building owners, and it is just, it's addressed to the property owners, but it is not addressed from like the city of whichever town or city you're from. It is addressed from the local volunteers, and basically it just states like, hi, my name is whatever, Nicole, and I am part of the wherever bad buildings committee. We noticed that you own this, may own this property, because sometimes people don't realize they own property because it might have been like an heirship thing, but basically putting it in a way where it's not like we're attacking them, we're not trying to be mean to them, but we want to reach out and see maybe if there are barriers that they have as to why their buildings look like that. Oftentimes we get responses and it's just an elderly couple who just doesn't have the means to keep up with their yard work and such, and so we try to help them. Right, this is just one of the kind of matrices that we have, where it just easily shows you the property types and the type of properties there are. So for instance, this community had 6 residential buildings that should be demolished, but they also had 23 that were fair and 17 that were poor, 18 that were good. One important thing to remember is just because a building is in fair condition doesn't mean that it can't easily fall into the poor category if not kept up with. So that is also another reason why we do try to keep track of these good and fair buildings as well. Right, this is one of the maps that I make on GIS, and this just shows the types of buildings that there were. So this community surveyed a lot of buildings that were single family homes. Those are the ones that are in yellow. And I also make another map that shows the condition of those buildings. So it looks like in this community, a decent amount of the buildings that were surveyed were rated fair, but there are some that are rated poor and should be demolished. And this way you can also see maybe like if there's a concentration of a lot of these bad buildings in one area of the town. Right, the next step is to create a redevelopment plan. So what we do is kind of like a little visioning exercise with the people in the community to see what they would like to see in their community and what their main concerns are with these bad buildings. And so what we do is we write down the property address, and then we go through, and this community actually chose redevelopment and reuse potential, dilapidation, visibility, and duration of vacancy as their priorities. And so they will rate each of the properties in each of these categories between 1, 2, or 3. And we have a separate definition sheet for each of those. So redevelopment and reuse potential is, like it states, like the potential that it has to be redeveloped or reused. So typically if there's a building that was rated should be demolished, they would get the lowest number in this category, which would be a 1. But they would probably get a 3 in dilapidation, health, and safety. Those are the ones that probably really do need to come down because they are big health and safety hazards. Visibility is the buildings that are located along the city's major gateways. So, you know, you live in a city, you bring new people in the city, or they're just driving through, you don't want them to see only dilapidated and abandoned buildings along their route. And then also duration of vacancy. So some communities chose to do that. They want to tackle the buildings that have been vacant the longest. And then we, in the last column, we do a total score, and the properties that end up with the highest number end up being the top priorities to try to tackle those buildings. We also do this prioritization matrix like this to be as objective as possible. And so we don't want some person who maybe their building is the highest priority in the city, we don't want them thinking that they were just singled out for no reason. So we would like to show them this and show that it was done in a very objective manner. Right, some other things that go into the redevelopment plan are just a little bit of local history, the community vision, existing conditions, the survey results and analysis of the survey. So like those tables that I showed you earlier and all the maps that we do, current initiatives, target site redevelopment recommendations, and next step recommendations. So this is just a picture of the front of the West Side Neighborhood Association report in West Side Charleston that was done in 2018. And so each community that does the Bad Buildings program will receive one of these reports at the end. All right, and step 5 is to implement the plan. And so this is where the community takes that plan and they implement it and do it on their own. The Bad Buildings team will always be there for questions and things like that in the future, but this is really where the community takes over. And we give them some resources such as the West Virginia Community Development Hub. They have a lot to do with like community coaching, for any legal support such as reviewing ordinances and maybe writing new ordinances, any code enforcement questions. We refer them to the WVU Land Use and Sustainable Development Law Clinic. And then for those brownfield buildings that we were talking about in the beginning, those larger scale, typically industrial, refer to the Brownfield Assistance Center, which is where Bad Buildings is kind of housed. And you can always go to our website, which actually this is not the correct website. I apologize. We recently switched websites. So the correct website is actually at the bottom of each of these slides, badbuildings.wvu.edu. And we have a lot of information on there, such as reusing a property, engaging property owners, legal tools, demolition and deconstruction, anything like that. And I believe that is the end. Sorry, that was kind of a quick run through of the program, but I feel like we covered a lot. So if you do have any questions, you can drop them in the chat. And if you need to reach out after this webinar is over, you can reach out to me. My contact info is there, as well as Carrie Staten, the director of the Bad Buildings program.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. That was great. A lot of good information there. We already have a couple questions in the chat, which is awesome. I'm going to give just a little bit of time for other people to finish typing some out if they have any and get a few more in there. But I've got one already that I kind of wanted to use to start things off with. Because selfishly, it was one of the things that took me forever to understand, because I'm very new to the whole brownfields realm, and I'm sure a lot of the people listening are as well. So what is kind of the difference between the Bad Buildings program and the Brownfields Assistance Center, sort of differentiating between what one does versus the other and how they fit into the picture together as a whole?
That is a great question that I'm going to try my best to answer. If I don't capture everything, I believe Carrie is on here and can tell me if I'm completely wrong. But so the Bad Buildings Center was created, the Brownfield Assistance Center was created first, and then the Bad Buildings program kind of came out of that. The Bad Buildings program, I feel like, is more like on hands with community members, and the Bad Buildings the Brownfield Assistance Center provides more technical assistance on bigger projects, like I said, like not typically homes, help a lot with EPA grants. Carrie, if you want to chime in, or Ray.
Sure, that's a great distinction for sort of how we function. The history is that the Brownfield Center was started 15 years ago, almost, to address issues related to brownfields, which are traditionally thought of as your more large industrial sites. So factories, glass factories, steel plants, even down to gas stations. And so as we were doing that work, probably about 10 years in, maybe less than that, the leadership, Patrick Kirby at the center, started seeing that we were having some interest and issues in communities related to abandoned, dilapidated buildings that maybe weren't really technically brownfields, but still had some of the same overlapping concerns, and needed some slightly different support, right? And so that is when the Bad Buildings program was born. So it started as a program of the Brownfield Center, and then as it has grown in scope and capacity, just sort of, we think of it as a sister program. It's sort of a spin-off of the Brownfield Center, but we share staff, so it can be confusing where the lines are. But that's sort of the history, but it's basically, and that key distinction, like Nicole said, is the residential. Brownfields are not usually residential unless it's a multifamily space, but a lot of these abandoned buildings and communities across the state are old homes. And so we wanted to be able to provide that assistance that was clearly needed, even if it was a little bit tangential to our original goals.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yes, that helps a lot. And there's a lot of overlap between the things, and that's why it's so hard to sort of figure out where the line is, like you said. So we've got a few questions in the chat now, so I'm going to switch over here to these. Going back to the community plans that you mentioned, how often are the community plans updated once originally created?
That is a great question. So we kind of leave that up to the community. We do reach out to them every once in a while. Like, we try to reach out to them yearly after they have graduated from the program, and we advise them to go out and kind of redo their surveys just to keep everything updated. But as the plan in general is not typically updated by the Bad Building staff, it is just however often the community wants to do that.
And the next question is about that West Side report that you mentioned. Is there a way to get a copy of that report online? We've got someone that's a local resident there from Charleston that's interested in that.
Yes, I can. Let me see. I'm trying to think of the best way, because I don't believe that's on our website, but I will have Kelsey actually, sorry, Kelsey, I'm volunteering you, maybe send out a copy of this report to everyone. After this webinar, you all would like that?
I can do that. All right. Next question. We've got a lot rolling in. This is great. And we've got plenty of time for Q&A, so we'll be able to get to all of these. Don't be shy. Don't feel like, since we've had a few come in, that you missed your chance. Keep sending them in. Next one. When writing letters to the owners, is it mentioned that there are tax credits for rehabilitation and restoration?
So actually not in the original letter. That is a great idea to maybe try to put some of that language in there. It might give them more incentive or something to respond back, because we don't always get responses from the friendly letters. But I do think that is a good idea. But yes, currently that language is not included in the letter. That is basic. It is a basic, just reaching out, introducing the program to the homeowner.
All right. And then the next question, this one's a little longer, so I'm going to read it out to you all. When doing surveys, is there a consideration to fill out the West Virginia Historic Property Inventory form with the State Historic Preservation Office? That way these are recorded as well historically, and if for tax credits or if federal funds or permits get involved, then it is recorded already for Section 106 review. It would also benefit to know the inventory, see if they already are recorded, if they're in a historic district.
So the short answer to that is we have not done that in the past, but that is also, I believe, something that we would do if a community would like to. But yeah, we've just never done that in the past.
Yeah, and so there is some overlap, and it depends on what a community's priorities are, right? So some communities just want to look at their blighted residential neighborhoods, and then you don't see a lot of sites that would qualify for the National Register. But occasionally we'll have communities that either map everything which would be one place that would be a great idea to do that, even if they're not dilapidated. And then other communities like I think Wheeling focused on their downtown, and there would definitely be sites in Wheeling, downtown Wheeling, that should be on the historic register.
Yes, and that Carrie actually brings up something that I forgot to mention, in that since it's a community-led thing, it's up to the community really to decide whether they want to survey, like Carrie said, all the buildings, just downtown, just residential. Some communities choose to only do vacant homes. So it's really just left up to the community what types of buildings they want to survey.
Excellent. Okay. Next question. If a building is on the National Register of Historic Places or in a historic district, then kind of what is the process with that? Is there additional consideration due to historic status before considering something like demolition?
So since I have been at bad buildings, I do not believe that we have surveyed a building that is on the National Register of Historic Places. And so I actually don't really know what the process would be, but obviously there would be a lot of consideration, and there probably wouldn't not be demolition on that building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's kind of a good lead into another question we get a lot about demolition in general. So demolition is a common concern in West Virginia. So there's been a lot of buzz about the CDBG funds that now have money allocated for demolition and how that's a really big deal. So if you want to take a second and just kind of talk about the demolition issue here.
Yeah, definitely. First, I do want to say if there are historic buildings on our in the survey process, then we actually would refer them to PAWW, which is the Preservation Alliance of West Virginia, because they are the experts. But as for the CDBG, so in the past, it is not easy for West Virginia communities or individuals to get money for demolition. There is money for demolition in the form of a loan, a small interest loan, but still a lot of West Virginia communities cannot afford to take out a loan, whether or not the interest on that is low or not. And so CDBG actually recently announced that they do have a grant that is a grant, not a loan, specifically for demolition in communities. They just rolled that out, and applications are due tomorrow, I believe. And we're hoping that there are a lot of communities that have applied for this and will receive it. But yes, it is exciting. There's still some a little quirks to it, I guess I would say, but overall it's great because it is a grant instead of a loan.
Okay. Let's see. For those of us looking to volunteer, how do we sign up, and are there areas in more need for assistance?
So it really just depends on where you live, I suppose. But the way that a Bad Buildings Committee team is formed is really just someone from that community reaching out to us, preferably with obviously like support from the city, because we would need them along the process. But if you just wanted to reach out to anyone from your city, if you wanted to start a Bad Buildings team in your community, and then just have someone reach out to us, and then we can get started.
Let's see. And then we've got a couple of follow-up responses to some of those questions. Let's see. So from Ernest Blevins, thank you for responding. The National Register of Historic Places does not protect itself. Local ordinances would come into play, and also Section 106 review. That's in reference to the demolition issue, if it's on the National Register, I believe. So comment on that. And then also to CDBG funds, Ernest mentions the funds would be required to go through Section 106 process, including the loan. They would have to have an HPI form and the project submitted to the State Historic Preservation Office. I reviewed many for Charleston and Huntington in the past, but if federal or even state funds involved, they would need a review. So some helpful firsthand experience there with that. Thanks, Ernest, again.
Definitely.
And then the last question we've got on here, how would the program work with a smaller, non-incorporated community?
That is a good question. So non-incorporated communities, this is part of the reason why we have tried to do actually countywide bad buildings process before, so we can include those non-incorporated communities. We have only done that in one county so far, and we are hoping to, we've learned from our experiences from the first round of doing a countywide, and be able to do more countywide bad buildings processes. But yes, it would typically be through a county, I believe. Harry, do you have any input?
Yeah, no, the challenge for an unincorporated location and the reason we would push it up to the county is because a lot of the tools that a community needs to address this issue are related to the governing body, right? And so that's why it's a lot easier for municipalities to deal with it, because they just tend to have more power. They tend to have more codes on the books, or the ability to have more codes. But that doesn't mean that we can't do it in the unincorporated sort of county level. We're just still figuring it out, frankly. So if you have one that you're interested in looking at the very least, we could help you identify and do some of those things that are not government focused, like the friendly letters, which do have a good success rate, and at least having the information gathered, and then trying to figure out the best way to work with your county government. It's just a different nut to crack from a legal standpoint.
Okay. And then I was looking back through to make sure I didn't miss anything, and I did miss one. Sorry, Matt. This one says, in Fayetteville, we have a dilapidated building committee, which is made up of the mayor, superintendent, council member, police and fire chiefs, and the town building inspector. And he asked, would this be in addition to or in absence of, I think he means like in addition to the bad buildings program, maybe? Like, I think, could bad buildings work with that sort of committee that's already in place somehow?
Oh yeah, we encourage.
Okay.
That would be the best, most ideal situation, is to have police, fire chief, building inspector, all of that already in place, and we would work together with them.
Okay. Yeah, the main theme that I'm hearing today is that a lot of the legwork and interest has to come from the community itself. So if you would like to be a bad buildings community, then come prepared to work. I've got one other question that I wanted to make sure that we talked about today. So if anyone has been on our website since we posted it there for you, or if you came to us because of the Abandoned Properties Coalition, I wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit, because that's another really good group that we do work with. So can you talk a little bit about what the APC is and what Bad Buildings does with them?
You want me to do that?
Yes, I got to carry.
So the Abandoned Properties Coalition was started almost around the same time as the Bad Buildings program got started. And it's a collection of people and organizations who are interested in this issue and who are interested in tackling it from a policy level. So while the Bad Buildings program is an on-the-ground technical assistance program, the Abandoned Properties Coalition can take that information from the ground, from our project, from other projects and communities across the state, to figure out what are some of these sort of overarching statewide or common policy issues that are making it more difficult to address the issue. And so that started very ad hoc. Ray Muller, who now works for the Brownfield Center, was one of the original founding members and is now the vice chair of that Abandoned Properties Coalition. And the way we work now, we've sort of formalized a little bit. So we have a steering committee, and then also a number of teams at any given time. Right now we have 4, I think, active teams that are looking at specific issues. So right now our teams are looking at issues related to abandoned schools. Another team is looking at land reuse generally, which is mostly focused on land reuse agencies or land banks. And then we have a team that's focused on trying to solve this problem of there not being enough demolition funding. And so we're trying to figure out a way to identify primarily state funding that would be able to fund demolition as a grant. There are loan programs available in the state primarily through the West Virginia Housing Development Fund, but a lot of communities just can't take on a loan. So we're trying to address that issue that way. And then we're gearing up something related to, in partnership with the Preservation Alliance, who serves on our steering committee. We're gearing our historic preservation team is getting back up to go to work with the legislature on the historic tax credit program. So that's sort of what we do. We have open meetings. All of our meetings are completely open. You can find the information at the Bad Buildings website. If you want to join a team, one of those teams, there's information there. If you have an idea of an issue that you think is really important and we should be focused on, there's information on the website on how to let us know that, because we're always looking for as much participation as we can. And then we meet quarterly, and we encourage people to join us for those meetings. And hopefully in the coming year or so, we're going to start having biannual in-person meetings of our whole sort of constituency. So anyone who wants to talk about the policy stuff will be having convenings. We had planned to have one in 2020 and got sidelined like the rest of the world. So we've been doing a lot more stuff virtually. And I think that we'll be hearing from those guys, from the new chair, Shay Straight of the Abandoned Properties Coalition, and some others about that more in depth in a future webinar.
That was going to be my segue. Thank you. Perfect. So I don't see any other questions here in the chat. So if anyone does have any more, please send them in the next couple of seconds, a minute or so. But on that note, yeah, so we've covered a lot of good stuff today. This is the first of many sessions of this webinar series. The next one is going to be in February on the 25th. So it'll always be the last Thursday of the month at 1 o'clock. So this one coming up in February is going to be about the APC. So if you haven't registered for that one yet, and any of this APC talk sounds interesting to you, go on ahead and go to the same webpage where you registered for this webinar, and it'll just be the link underneath of that one for today. So go ahead and register for that. And if you have any questions or difficulties or anything like that, again, still reach out to me. Feel free. If you would like to be a Bad Buildings community or have any questions about any of that work, go ahead and reach out to Nicole or Carrie. You've got their contact info there on the screen. I still haven't seen any other questions come in, so I think we are good to go ahead and wrap up today. So thank you all so very much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you, Nicole, for giving us a great presentation, and for Carrie for being on hand to answer some questions. Thank you all very much, and hope you all have a wonderful day, and we'll hopefully see you next month. Stay tuned.